Kelvin is an ugly, lonely loser who finds himself in a new world where he has the powers of a summoner. While trying to keep his powers a secret with the help of a goddess, he collects all sorts of different monsters, aiming to become the strongest summoner in the world. Kelvin suddenly regains consciousness and finds himself in a strange place under a tree in a forest. While wondering where he is, a menu bar shows up with an option for him to click on the start button. After clicking the start option, he hears a soothing female voice which tells him that she is the goddess of reincarnation. She welcomes him to another world where he has been chosen to be reincarnated. Also, she explains to him that he had chosen to give up memories of his old world. On hearing this, Kelvin becomes shocked, and he begins to blame his pre-incarnated self for being so stupid that he would agree to this. At that moment, the goddess tells him that he should look at the menu bar to see the skills he had chosen before he reincarnated, and after checking out the cool skills, he becomes pleased with the skills he sees, which makes him commend his reincarnated self. The goddess informs Kelvin that he is in a world full of magic and fantasies, and the first thing he would have to do is to go to a nearby town to look for the Adventurers Guild to register as an adventurer. On the way there, the goddess reveals her name as Melfina. She tells Kelvin that his past self had fallen in love with her and confessed this to her. She continues that she had joined him in this life as a form of vacation for herself, due to the fact that she had been working for hundreds of years without rest. She also adds that he had said he would love her without his memories, and since he sounded sincere, she allowed him to trade his memories for skills. While he communicates with Melfina in his mind, the people around assume he has gone mad. When he notices that he is being watched, Kelvin immediately runs away and goes to a corner to calm himself down. His slutty mind thinks that Melfina must be his type for him to have loved and fallen for her. He adds that he needs to see her, and seeks to know if she can be summoned. She replies that he cannot summon her yet as he does not have enough power to do that. She tells him that she would watch him grow and learn more skills to enable him to do this and tell her how much he loves her. But Kelvin strongly believes he would not do such a thing. As they get to the Adventurers Guild, Melfina announces their arrival to Kelvin, and he immediately likes the building. When he goes inside, he meets the cute-looking attendant and tells her that he would like to register. She gives him a form to fill, and he immediately realizes that he can understand the language. Just as he is about to write, Melfina immediately asks him if he is going to write that he is a summoner. Being a clueless dummy, he says yes. Hearing this, she tells him not to, since skills as a summoner is a very rare one which would attract the attention of people with high status. Due to this, Kelvin registers himself as a green mage and takes up a job to defeat 3 blue slimes that Melfina advises him to take. Before leaving the guild, he buys a magic wooden rod, which would help to defeat the blue slimes. Then Melfina tells him that the rod he had bought is not entirely ordinary, as it has just a little amount of magic he needs. On getting to where the slimes are, Melfina tells Kelvin to use one of his skills, called the Appraisal Eye, to see the status bar of his target. Kelvin suddenly asks Melfina if he is unable to see her status bar, because she is above level 100, and she ignores his question. Deviating from the task at hand, he insists on knowing how much power he would need in order to summon her. With Melina acting like she can't hear him, he remembers his tasks and decides to leave his questions for Melfina, for when he is done finishing his quest, he becomes focused on having a contract with one of the slimes. Melfina tells him that he has to get the consent of his target. In order to do that, and for the slime which possesses no speech ability, he has to weaken them and not kill them so that they would give him their consent. Kelvin immediately rushes towards the slimes to attack them with his wooden rod, but he falls to the ground after being hit by one of the slimes. Kelvin realizes his carelessness and continues to try to defeat the slime, but he gets hit, and as he tells himself that he has to watch carefully, he immediately sees that he can defeat the slime by watching closely, and he suddenly hits the slime and he is able to make it weak. Kelvin tries the contract, and when he asks Melfina how to make the slime understand the contract, she tells him to stretch his arm forward. Then he begins to feel a rush of energy in his arm. Kelvin asks Melfina what is happening to him, and she explains to him that he is feeling like that because of the magic he had used in defeating the slime, but because he wants to use the contract, it would also cost him some of his health points. Kelvin suddenly yells at Melfina, asking her why she had not told him about that earlier, but he ignores her and tries the contract. When he tries the contract, he immediately absorbs the slime into himself, and Melfina tells him excitedly that he has completed the contract and he is able to communicate with the monster he had absorbed. She also adds that he has to give the monster a name. Then Kelvin names the slime Clotho. Kelvin suddenly notices that he can feel a sensation in his chest, and when he asks Melfina, she tells him that he can communicate with Clotho without words, as he is able to feel what Clotho is feeling. He also proceeds to try his summoning skills, and when he summons Clotho, it comes out and he tells Clotho that he would allow him to absorb other slimes they defeat together after Melfina jokingly calls him a monster for making Clotho absorb his kind. Soon, Clotho and Kelvin come across some slimes, and before they attack the slimes, Kelvin notices how Clotho's body grew a little bit bigger. But he also recounts how he is anticipating Clotho's growth. The duo attacks the slimes, and as Kelvin kills one of the slimes, Clotho also deals with the rest of the slimes on its own. Together, they defeat the 3 slimes, but when Kelvin checks Clotho's data, he sees that Clotho has become stronger since he met him. Kelvin suddenly thinks out loud as he wonders how unfair it is for him to have great skills, as it is unfair to other ranked adventurers. Then Melfina adds to Kelvin's thought that he is the only summoner in the country. Then Kelvin becomes convinced of the reason why every country needs a summoner. After the fight, the attendant at the guild named Ange pays Kelvin and also recommends an inn for him to spend the night. On his way to the inn, Kelvin asks Melfina why she had not given him enough money from the beginning so that he would be able to buy better weapons, but she replies that if she had done that, he would not have fun making money by himself. Suddenly, Kelvin sees some men trading slaves, and his attention becomes fixed on a beautiful elf slave among them, but he wonders why she had a weird-looking brace on her neck. Then the slaver explains to the men that the elf is of a mixed blood, but Kelvin stares at the elf, who in turn looks at him and faces down in her cage. However, he immediately leaves the place, and when he gets to the inn, he meets Claire, who is in charge of the inn. Kelvin goes to his room, and when he asks Melfina if there is a bath in his room, she replies that it is only castles that have baths, and commoners are meant to take their bath in rivers or with hot towels. On hearing this, Kelvin decides that he would work hard enough so that he would live in a house with a bath someday. Kelvin's stomach begins to cry for help, and he goes to meet Claire, who serves him some delicious food. Melfina tells him to grow fast so that he would have enough magic powers to summon her, and so she can get the chance to eat human food. After a week of taking more jobs as an adventurer, Kelvin levels up as he takes more dangerous jobs, and he is also able to upgrade Clotho as well. On getting to the Adventurers Guild, Ange informs Kelvin that he has upgraded to an E rank due to the jobs he has been finishing, and she advises him to change his gear. However, a proud-looking young man who has been watching and listening to Ange and Kelvin's conversations comes to meet Kelvin. He steps out like a top G and introduces himself as Cashel, who is a ranked adventurer, and the other adventurers in the guild begin to talk about how Cashel loves to hold a typical weird conversation with new adventurers, so that they would begin to feel less of themselves so as not be as good as he is. Cashel informs Kelvin that he is going after the Black Ghost Knight with the rest of his party, and he also asks Kelvin if he would like to follow them so that they would share the rewards. Then Ange tells Cashel that the job is too dangerous for Kelvin, but Cashel replies Ange with pride as he tells her that he would make sure Kelvin is safe. Kelvin declines Cashel's offer, and he uses his appraisal eyes to check his stats, and he sees that they are as high as Clotho's. Then he tells Cashel that they should have a competition, and Cashel pridefully agrees. Kelvin tells Melfina that he would deliberately walk into Cashel's trap so that he would be able to catch him when he tries to kill him because of Cashel's past records as a murderer. As Melfina comes to talk about Kelvin's decision to take Cashel down, Kelvin yells at her loudly, forgetting that he was supposed to use his inner voice for her to keep quiet, but Ange and the rest of the attendant in the guild keeps quiet. They wish Kelvin good luck because they thought he was talking to them as they were talking while he leaves the guild. Cashel goes away from the guild, and when he gets to a corner in the streets, he meets another man. The man informs him that he is not able to see Kelvin's abilities because he is using a type of concealing magic. One member of Cashel's party, Raj, who looks like a homeless shithead, comes out, and he tells the rest of the party that he would make sure he crushes Kelvin.
Wait a minute!
Later at the Wicked Spirit's castle, Cashel and his party run into the castle, but on getting inside, they realize that all the undead monsters have been defeated before their arrival. But when they begin to question each other, Kelvin comes out, and he tells Cashel and his party that he is going to win the competition. The bald-headed dummy called Raj tells Kelvin that he is only waiting for them because he knows he would not be able to defeat the Black Ghost Knight. Kelvin begins to provoke the party as he hopes to get some action while fighting with them, and Cashel asks him if he is planning to receive the bounty on them, but Kelvin, who is not aware of the bounty, tells them that he might just be lucky. Cashel calls on Raj, who is the strongest in the party, to attack Kelvin. Just as Raj runs to attack Kelvin, he falls into a trap Kelvin had set with his green mage magic, which allows him to start sinking into mud, and he is not able to get out. Then Cashel begins to wonder how he is able to set the trap, as that kind of magic takes time to be activated. Jimmel, who is the third member of the party, apologizes to Cashel that he was not able to detect the concealment with his magical powers. Then he runs away as he tells Raj and Cashel that Kelvin is dangerous. Melfina tells Kelvin that Jimmel is running away and Cashel is trying to attack him, but Kelvin tells her that it is all part of his plan, and he immediately summons Clotho to stop Jimmel. Clotho, who is no longer a blue slime but a huge slime Glatonia, appears in front of Jimmel and stops him, but as he tries to run, Clotho suddenly attacks him. Meanwhile, Raj uses his skills to get out of the mud trap, and when he tells Cashel that he would attack Clotho the slime, Clotho suddenly uses its tentacles to tie him and Cashel gets beaten up by Kelvin. Melfina tells Kelvin that he has to go and face the Black Ghost Knight after defeating Cashel and his party, and when Kelvin enters the room where the knight is, he sees the knight and also his stats, and he tells the knight named Gerard that he wants him to be in his party. Gerard tells Kelvin how people see him as a monster, but Kelvin tells himself that Gerard is just a man that wants someone to talk to. Kelvin asks Gerard if he would be at his party and sign a contract with him, but Gerard tells him that he had been serving a king before, and he had a responsibility to avenge the death of his wife and daughter. Kelvin challenges Gerard to a duel, and while fighting, Kelvin realizes how strong Gerard is as he is able to block attacks from his blind spots, but a few minutes later, Kelvin defeats Gerard, and he agrees to the contract. Kelvin goes back to the guild. The other adventurers in attendance congratulate him and thank him as well for helping them to capture Cashel and his party for their atrocities. Ange goes to meet Kelvin, and she tells him that he has been promoted to a higher rank, and the head of the guild would thank him properly. While going to meet the head, Gerard asks Kelvin if Ange would be suitable for his harem, and when Gerard and Melfina with Clotho begins to discuss about how Ange is good for Kelvin's harem, but Kelvin shuts them up as he tells them not to talk inside his head. Then Melfina suddenly tells Kelvin that there is someone in front of him. The old man tells Kelvin that the day is bright for adventurers as it is the right time for them to get jobs done, and he also adds that he is also the head of the guild named Leo. Leo begins to use his appraisal eye to check Kelvin's stats so as to know who he really is, and when Kelvin also uses his appraisal eyes to check Leo's abilities, he realizes that Leo has a rank A appraisal eye, which means that he would be able to see through his concealment magic and also see that he is a summoner. Leo invites Kelvin to his office, and he tells him about Cashel, and he also tells him that he knows about him being a summoner. On hearing this, Kelvin becomes uneasy that he has been found out. Then Melfina and Gerard tell him to be calm as they would be with him in case of any emergency. Kelvin then asks Leo why he did not capture Cashel and his party, as he would have known who they are with his appraisal eye, but Leo apologizes for that as he tells Kelvin that he had been making plans to stop Cashel, but Kelvin had captured him before he was able to do so.
Stop the cap!
Leo also adds that he is not trying to be Kelvin's enemy, as he had met others from another world, who are called the heroes of the Holy Empire of Duramus. Kelvin becomes surprised, and Melfina tells him new information that she had reincarnated a lot of people. She states that she would tell him about it later, as they all need to focus on Leo and what he is saying. Leo explains further that the priestess of Duramus had heard of the prophecy of God and summoned all the heroes of Duramus, as the revival of the Demon King had come upon them. And the reason the knight Kelvin defeated is strong is also because of the revival of the Demon King. Leo informs Kelvin that the heroes are not able to protect them. Because Kelvin has the skills of a rankus adventurer, he accepts Leo's offer. On getting to his inn, Kelvin sees Claire, and she immediately hugs him to congratulate him on his job, making him feel accomplished in his job. When Kelvin asks her how she knows about it, she tells him that other young adventurers are talking about him and how awesome he is. Claire tells Kelvin that she would make him a nice lunch while he goes to his room. While eating, Kelvin asks Melfina about the people she reincarnated. She tells him that when the priestess performed his summoning magic, she found people to reincarnate, and those people would be in a good and high rank, but the whole issue does not have anything to do with him. After his meal, Kelvin lays down on his bed, and while he begins to think about the situation of the heroes and the Demon King, he summons Clotho and asks it for the reward money he had given him. With this money, he heads out, and informs Claire before he leaves that she should prepare 2 plates of food for him for dinner. On his way, Gerard asks him what he is going to buy. Then he replies Gerard that he is going to get a female slave. Kelvin goes to the place he had seen an elf for sale, but on getting there, he sees that a man is yelling and the owner of the slaves for sale is trying to help the man to put out the fire on his body. When Kelvin asks what was happening, the owner of the slaves for sale tells him that the mixed-breed elf has a curse on her that sets anyone who touches her on fire. Kelvin looks at the slave, and he leaves as he asks Melfina the skills he needs so as to break the curse on the slave girl. But few minutes later, Kelvin comes back to meet the owner of the slaves for sale, and he tells the man that he would like to buy the elf slave, but the man tells him that the elf is cursed, as he had witnessed what had happened to the man that wanted to buy her earlier that day. While the man was trying to convince Kelvin not to buy the elf slave, Kelvin immediately drops a bag of money on his palm, and the man keeps quiet as he opens the cage and tells the elf that Kelvin is her new master. The elf gets out, and Kelvin uses his appraisal eye to check the elf's stats, and he sees that she has not used any of her points. After buying the slave, the elf follows Kelvin, and she immediately thanks him for buying her, and they both introduce each other as the girl tells Kelvin that her name is Ifil. Kelvin proceeds to use his powers to break her curse, and he asks her how long she has been a slave for, and she explains to him that she was sold after she was born, and she has been a slave since then, but Kelvin tells her that she would leave a good life as he removes her cuffs. Ifil begins to cry as she kneels in front of Kelvin, and she tells him that she would be his servant. Then Melfina tells Kelvin that she would allow Ifil to serve Kelvin till he is able to summon her. Kelvin takes Ifil to the inn, and after he introduces her to Claire, he asks Claire if she would be able to find good clothes for her, and immediately Claire tells him that she would have to take care of the clothes before she serves him dinner. After going with Ifil for a few minutes, Claire comes out and she presents Ifil to Kelvin, who becomes surprised on seeing Ifil look so beautiful in maid clothes. After dinner, Kelvin takes Ifil to his room, and he introduces the rest of his party to her as he tells her of his power as a summoner. Then he lets Ifil pick the same skills as himself so that he would be able to train her very well. That night, Kelvin becomes stressed as he gets into a dilemma when Claire tells him that there is no room with 2 beds. Due to this, he is forced to share a bed with Ifil, who had fallen asleep beside him, leaving him with different thoughts of plot development.